Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka the Knockdown. Jay, how's it going, my guy?
Man, we finally got preseason basketball. I never thought I would be this hyped for exhibition hoops, but between that and the WNBA Finals, bro, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, bro. Fully locked in to basketball, and we are in that space now, bro, where the news is starting to pick up. Some of the players are starting to finally get their contract situations handled. I think the Jonathan Kuminga and Quentin Grimes things have
Both
both been
have
pretty
been, yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, now they've kind of come to their conclusions, both different ends of the spectrum than maybe what we anticipated. Jonathan Kuminga kind of felt like he was going to be in a situation where maybe he would end up signing the qualifying offer and holding the gun. Instead, he's put in a situation where he probably is still likely to get traded around January. On the
Honestly,
other end, Quentin Grimes, I thought he had a pretty good chance of getting an extension with the Philadelphia 76ers, given the state of their roster. Instead, he's got to play ball with them now, signing the qualifying offer and really figure things out. So it's just a lot of stuff going on. And that doesn't even include the WNBA Finals that's had a really decent start to it, despite the fact that the games have been competitive. But boy, it's looking smidget lopsided right now, TV. I'm not gonna lie to you.
especially game two. We're gonna talk about the WNBA Finals. We're gonna obviously start off the show with that pretty soon. We got part 3 of the NBA 21 Qs questions. So this is like questions 11 to 15. So that's gonna be an also great part of the episode. But yeah, like Jay mentioned, preseason hoops has started. As of recording, Jay, my Raptors are starting tonight, having their first game in Vancouver. So I'm definitely gonna be locked into that. The Raptors content should be coming back to TV on Basketball soon, guys. Be on the lookout for that as well. And of course, man, we got a lot of basketball to talk about. And then with the season coming up soon, we have a bunch of stuff planned here on the Hit Your Fields podcast. So be sure to be on the lookout for that for sure. But today's episode, 21 Qs, WNBA Finals, should be a damn good episode. Before we get into that, Jay, we do have to plug our other socials. Make sure you follow our individual socials at TV on Basketball, at the Routine Jumper. Those links can be found in the description down below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best NBA content. The pics are coming back soon. We got the news, the different series, the clips. All of that stuff can be found over there on the TikTok and Instagram page. In terms of YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. Also, check out some of our YouTube shorts there. If you want to see some of our short-form content that we post to TikTok and Instagram, some of them actually make it to the YouTube shorts. So make sure you check that out over there. And if you're listening to any of the podcasts on any of the podcast networks, Spotify, Apple, all that's good stuff. We appreciate you. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review and all that good stuff. We appreciate all of you. We see all of you. And yeah, thank you for tapping into another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast. Jay, are you ready to get into this?
Yeah, man. WNBA Finals has been quite the interesting one. It's a good place for the pod to start.
100%. And Jay, the Las Vegas Aces have taken full control of this series as they are 2-0 up. They defend home court, winning both games at home. The first game, honestly, was an absolute banger between both teams. Not gonna lie, I was at the freaking WNBA Temple watch party and I saw the collapse of the Phoenix Mercury in like that final minute. That was kind of hard to watch, but good win for the Aces there. But once again, man, that duo of Jackie Young and Asia Wilson, tracking back all the way to the Indiana Fever series, came up big again with a 60-point performance between the two of them. Jackie Young taking over the second half, Asia Wilson taking over the first half. Man, Jay, I'm going to throw it over to you, but the Las Vegas Aces, when their stars are killing it as they are right now, even a team as good as the Phoenix Mercury on the defensive end, they find it hard to stop.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a two-man game that just seems like it's just treading in the right direction, right? At a really good time. And TV, we talked about this before the WNBA playoffs even started. This was one of those teams that, despite our trepidations about their offense outside of Jackie Young and Asia Wilson, who have been kind of carrying this thing in spite of, we said coming into the playoffs, like, they're the team with the hot hand right now. They're the team that fixed everything post WNBA All-Star break and just seemed like they were kind of riding this wave of finally getting things on track. And TV, the track is continuing to steam on ahead in the forward direction. They have not slowed down by any means. And this is an offense that seems to just understand, like, look, we have two of the better playmakers in the WNBA right now. They both are just not able to miss, it seems. Jackie Young had 32 points in 34 minutes, TV. 32 points in 34 minutes.
19 in the third quarter. She was absolutely unconscious in that third quarter.
Like, what are we actually talking about? Asia Wilson in a game, gotta have it still to make sure you protect home court in game 2. 28 points, 14 rebounds, just overall really solid as a rim protector all night long. And more particularly, TV, we're gonna get into this when we talk about the Mercury a little bit more, but able to hold some of the key Mercury stars under wraps offensively. Like this Aces team, they know who their go-tos offensively are, but defensively, this team is as cohesive as it's ever been throughout the entirety of this 2025 season. And they have really come together as a strong unit over the last couple of games, but particularly in these two in the finals, where they've been able to hold real accountability for stars like Dewana Bonner. I'll go deeper into that a little bit later, and kind of keep that under control. Now, don't get me wrong, Kalia Copper has arrived on the scene in this series after kind of having a quiet postseason for most of the run. That's been a big bright spot for the Mercury. But outside of that, and a little bit of Satu Sabali heroics here and there, I mean, this Aces team has put the Mercury offense in check for like pretty much the entirety of all 8 quarters, bro.
No, 100%, man. I mean, like speaking of the freaking Phoenix Mercury defense, one of the biggest things that is always like showing out to me, especially in that game 2, is they're doing something a lot different than the Indiana Fever, and I think the Indiana Fever are obviously forced to do that because they were forced to do this because they just didn't have many bodies, and they were just like, okay, let's just try and throw stuff and see if it works. They were able to throw a lot of bodies at Asia Wilson, give her different looks, have a lot of girls, defend her at different times. So there's no like they're not showing them like one way to defend Asia Wilson. They're giving them different looks, and that's what got Asia Wilson a little bit frustrated. That's where she got a little bit. That's where she started to struggle a lot. Jay, they had AT
Mm,
on Asia Wilson a lot of game 2, and you know what Asia Wilson did? Get that girl in foul trouble. Three first half fouls. She had to be taken out real early in this game, and that disrupted the whole
yeah.
flow of the Phoenix Mercury offense. And the thing is, the Phoenix Mercury offense hasn't even been bad. Like you mentioned, Kalia Copper has been great in this series. My only problem with her is that because she's been on fire from 3, she's becoming a little bit too over reliable on that, and she kind of fizzes out at the end of the game. Satu, again, she has her good moments, like the first quarter of like the first half of game 1, the fourth quarter in game 2. But just for longer stretches of periods of game, I need to see a bit more from Satu, and the 3-point shot just needs to continue to fall for her because it has been a lot of one of your favorite things. The ebbs and flows of the game so far has you could see Satu really going through that. But Jay, making sure that Alyssa Thomas stays on the bench has been a big part for the Las Vegas Aces, and it has me thinking. Do they have to go to the Indiana Fever sort of game plan and just throw different bodies at her? Not only, even though that Alyssa Thomas is probably your best defender on the team, you can't be having a situation where she plays 30 minutes in game 2, but she got taken out real early in that first half, taking her out of stride offensively. She didn't have a great offensive game in that end, and then just wasn't able to close out the half there, where the Aces just started to pull away more and more. And you need Alyssa Thomas to be there for all major parts of the game. So defensively, the Phoenix Mercury have, I think, options for like have different defensive schemes for Asia Wilson. It's just they have to just kind of like open up the break in case of emergency because you're freaking 2-1, 2-0 down in the WNBA Finals. You need to start really doing some more experimentation to him, throwing some things at the wall to see what's going to stick. Because right now, what you're doing, putting Alyssa Thomas on her 24/7, it's not working out for you. And there's a lot of other stuff we got to get into more specifically the bench because man, I was hyping up this Phoenix Mercury bench going into the series, and the Aces bench is freaking out playing them like crazy. But yeah, the whole defensive scheme, having Alyssa Thomas guard Asia Wilson the whole time, you need to kind of switch that up. And the overall reliance on the 3-point shot, yes, it's been hitting, especially in the first half of game 1 and in the first quarter of game 2 as well. But you just gotta you have to like continue to get that more well-rounded game over there for the Mercury, and maybe this change of scenery back at home is going to help that.
Yeah, I mean, you hope if you're a Phoenix Mercury fan that the home crowd is going to come out in a real way. Obviously, game 2 also had a weird attendance issue. We won't go into that too much,
Yeah,
but there was a little bit of an issue, particularly related to that as well. But another thing that I think is really important, and you touched on it a little bit, is that bench for Las Vegas. You get 40 points in game 1 from Dana Evans and Joel Lloyd off the bench.
they were
Then you
incredible.
get the
Yeah,
you get the Jackie Young, Asia Wilson game in game 2. It really is a game of pick your poison in that situation where now the guards in particular, Dana Evans, Jewel Lloyd, Jackie Young, and I would even say Chelsea Gray played a very all-around game in game 2 was probably where she was the most balanced. I think you can make an argument for both, right? Chelsea Gray, 8 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds in game 1, 2. So just been a really steady hand. That guard rotation entirely for the Las Vegas Aces is produced in a real way, whether it's been offensively being able to put the ball in the basket or simply just being really efficient about how they move this offense around, and it's allowed them to do a lot where they just been they like I said in the beginning, TV. It just seems like they're firing on all cylinders right now. It seems like the hot hand that they've been riding for the last pretty much month and a half, it seems like at this point, is kind of still right there in full flux. And this is a Phoenix Mercury team right now that you mentioned the foul trouble issues, but I would also say like DeWanna Bonner was a very big contributor in that last series to get them here, right? And in 2 games so far, she has 14 points. 14 points combined over 2 games in the WNBA Finals. That's not
Yeah,
going to
5
cut
for
it. I
18
think
shooting. Yeah,
it's one of
5
the
for
easiest
18
things.
shooting as well. Yeah, 5 for 18 shooting as well.
Yeah. And I know in the semifinal series, those first handful of games, she was struggling from 3 and then started to really pick up momentum in those last 2 games to close out the series. But that was a hot hand you were hoping that was going to continue into the finals because they were going to need that stretchability from the perimeter to allow her to be another like big wing to play against what essentially is kind of a relatively undersized Las Vegas Aces team when you look past Asia Wilson, if we're being honest, right? They have Nalissa Smith playing at center. Realistically, this should be a team that if they want to go band for band and play, the size game, yes, the Mercury have Natasha Mack, who's played a decent amount of minutes, but being able to lean on that 5-man lineup of Kalia Copper, Satu Sabli, Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner, and then in certain instances also Sammy Wickham, that should be something that they should be able to put a lot of faith into. And instead, the DeWanna Bonner element just has not clicked. Like it has not manifested itself in the same way that you would have hoped, given the fact that this team, like offensively, is just in a weird spot. They're getting rusty at a weird space, and I think that's kind of odd. But I think that goes to tell you that the physicality of players like Asia Wilson, where you mentioned the foul trouble for someone like Alyssa Thomas, it's creating this certain level of discombobulation where now the Mercury offense, you can tell the night and day difference with Thomas on and off the floor. Like the stats tell you straight up that there's obviously a difference in efficiency, but now we're seeing it in 4K that like this team just doesn't know how to operate outside of give Kalia Copper the ball and let her go to town. Because other than that, Alyssa Thomas has not really been able to direct the way she has throughout the entirety of the postseason.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And the thing is, Jay, we've seen Alyssa Thomas throughout this entire playoffs, and she has been like, what? Is it fair for me to say that she's been like one of the 2 best players this entire playoffs?
Yeah, I think
She is
arguably has to be in at least the top 3 of best performers throughout the
exactly.
postseason. Yes.
Yeah, and we've been talking about her all season as the number 3 MVP candidate throughout the regular season, and now she's been playing like even better basketball in the playoffs. So, like you mentioned, them trying to figure out offense with her on the court, like she does a bit of everything. I like to look at Alyssa Thomas as kind of like a more souped up version of Draymond Green, because you're going to get the defense from her, you're going to get the assist numbers, you're going to get the rebounding from her. It's just she just gets a lot better scoring numbers than you would get out of a Draymond Green, and this is what Alyssa Thomas gives you, just a great all around player and all that. So not having her on the court, being your vocal leader, being your on the court leader, it's definitely strange if you're someone like the with the Phoenix Mercury, who has seen her, who has felt her presence throughout most of the playoffs. So yeah, not
Mm-hmm.
having her on the court is definitely throwing off a little bit of the offense. And I think more than anything, the bench, like I mentioned earlier, it's feeling the worst of it so far, because people like Sammy Whitcomb, who I was very excited about going into this series, has not shot the ball well at all. DeWanna Bonner, she had an okay game 1, and even like when I was like watching the game, she was getting a lot of shots up, but she had an okay game 1. was basically invisible in game 2. Even
Yes.
someone like Monique Akoa McConney, who had a solid playoff run going up to this, she's probably been like their fourth best player, and she hasn't even been that great. So going into this playoffs, I always thought, you know what, the Phoenix Mercury were going to have the depth advantage, and now that the script is flipped, has made me think, man. Even up till now, it's going to be hard unless like there's going to be major changes to this Mercury team, especially with the offense slowing down in the middle quarters as it has been.
Mm.
It's going to be hard for them to turn it around on the Aces, who look like the best version of themselves at the right time. And it's hard to hard to say that we didn't kind of see this coming. They've been to the finals 3 out of the last 4 years. They know how to perform in these situations. And more than anything, dude, this is like business as usual for someone like an Asia Wilson and all these girls.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too is when you approach game 3, this is not even about a particular game plan, I think, TV, if I'm being honest with you. This is about coming out survival. This is survival mode. This is where you have to make the game mucky. You have to make it
I
physical. It
mean,
has
they
to be
know
a
how to do
finesse.
that for sure. The
Yes,
Phoenix definitely knows how to do that.
yes, this is a team that needs to get a little, not disrespectful, but they need to get a little grimy a bit. You know what I mean? This is a team that
Yes.
needs to step up in
Yes,
a way that
exactly.
realizes, like, okay, we're playing with the opportunity to lose all of this without winning a single game in the finals. Like that, because that's a real possibility, right? The goal of this series now for the Phoenix Mercury is the same as the Aces was in games 1 and 2. Protect home court. If the Mercury can even this series up at 2-2, they're more than talented enough to make this a 6 to 7 game series. I mean, excuse
Yeah,
me, they're more than talented enough to make this a 7 game series. The
it becomes
question,
0-0 at that point. Yeah.
yes, the question is more so, will the Aces be able to continue this, and in what formality will that look like? Again, as we mentioned before, we got the bench mob game in game 1, then we got the astounding 2-man game from Jackie Young and Asia Wilson in game 2. Who is the combination in game 3? Or on the other side of it, if you're looking at it from the Aces perspective, can they keep DeWanna Bonner quiet for 3-4 straight games under these bright lights? Because that's the player I'm zooming in on the most in terms of being able to step up in a real way offensively for this Mercury team. If you can keep DeWanna Bonner 10 points or less for a third, even a fourth straight game, oh, I mean, this series is over for the Mercury that quickly. So I'm almost saying that as much as I think the Las Vegas Aces offense has its interesting foibles in terms of like who they're going to lean on a game to game basis, the real question is, can their defense remain this stout for another 3-4 another for games 3 and 4, and keep DeWanna Bonner particularly at bay and continue to put Alyssa Thomas in trouble defensively in terms of her not being able to be as physical because she's trying to avoid foul trouble. If you're now forcing 2 of your better wing defenders to have to be very timid, both about how they defend and even about how they go about scoring, you've taken 2 of their best players out of the game entirely at that point. And that's what's part of what has hurt them so far through these first 2 games. It could be the thing that leads to lead to the Mercury's ultimate demise if these 2 can't step up.
Yeah, no, 100%. It really does feel like the Mercury are playing more Las Vegas Aces basketball than really trying to set the tone themselves. I mean, you mentioned them getting mucky. We know that they're able to do that. We've seen that in the Liberty series. We've seen that especially in the Minnesota Lynx series. They know how to get down and grimy and win those tough it out sort of games. So the
Yep.
fact that it's been these high scoring ball games that they had to kind of go band for band with the Las Vegas Aces, it's kind of strange coming from a Phoenix Mercury team. And then they have offensive firepower. They have the offensive weapons. But this is not the Mercury game plan that got them to this point. This is not what got them to near the finish line. So I think back at home where they feel comfortable, where the crowd is 100% on their side compared to that rowdy Aces crowd,
Mm-hmm.
you know that they got to get the momentum back soon. And I think this translates very well to to the next part of the question, Jay. The keys to victory for both these teams. Let's start off with the Phoenix Mercury because they're the ones with their backs against the wall.
Yeah.
What do you think are the keys to victory to them going into the rest of the series?
I think the biggest thing is that again, I've kind of been touching on it a ton, but the Dewana Bonner thing is so important. I mean, offensively, she has to be a factor. It's one thing to be shooting the ball at high volume, and like you said, she's taken a lot of shots through 2 games, but the efficiency is just not there. And that's one of those things that's kind of hurt them throughout the entirety of the postseason, is that her 3 ball, in particularly, has kind of come and gone. I mentioned in those last 2 games, and we talked about this going off of them winning that series, that like DeWanna Bonner was starting to slowly but surely get her stroke back from beyond the arc in those last 2 games to close out the series against the Lynx. And it seems like here we are again, regressing back to the mean. I don't know if it's just one of those things where she starts off series slow and starts to kind of pick up momentum as we go along. A little Tyron Lue action going on there. I don't know if that's the moves, but if it is, that means there's a prime opportunity for her in game 3 and game 4 to really pick things up in front of the home crowd and kind of let this thing kind of return back to sender, in a sense of, this is a player that is a high level 3-point shooter, can space the floor, is a reliable offensive engine that you can actually run offense through. Like, the fact that they've had to be so dependent on Kalia Copper to create offense for them is so surprising, given the fact that, and Satu Sabali has been solid as well. I don't want to disrespect her in the sense of this either, but they've had to rely so much on those two to generate offense. And it's almost like making up for the fact that, again, Alyssa Thomas's presence on the floor has been missed in a certain extent, because she hasn't been able to be as aggressive both on offense or on defense
Yeah.
throughout the 2 games in this series. And then DeWanna Bonner, the stroke is just not there right now, which is putting her in a tough position to not be as productive as she was just coming off of in those last 2 games against the Minnesota Lynx. Like, that was supposed to be that propeller for her to be like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and those were 2 games that really solidified, like, okay, these are the moments that the Phoenix Mercury looked forward to when they said, this is why we brought her in. This is why, despite all the drama with everything that was going on with the Indiana Fever and so on and so forth, we cleared out a space to bring in DeWanna Bonner at the midway point of the WNBA season. This is why we said that, despite the fact that our roster is brand new front to back from last year, except for like 2 returning players, let's add one more player that hasn't played in a Phoenix Mercury uniform and put her in a situation, despite being a former All-Star, despite being a former WNBA playoff performer in big moments, just adding to the well of riches they already had. We're gonna make it work anyway. Those were supposed to be moments that solidified that. And it seems like, again, as I mentioned before, there's like that regression that's coming back, and you just wonder if that's the Aces, or you wonder if that's just the Warner Bonner. And that's a tough situation to kind of go into if you're the Mercury, because you need this right. You need this to right the ship. Like, in order for this series to get even back up, she has to be one of your top contributors. She has to.
She has to be the leader of the, not only just a second unit, but just like the supporting cast of
Yes.
of the of the Phoenix Mercury. Because you know what you're gonna get from Alyssa Thomas. I know that she had a rough start to the series. She's been a little bit missing in periods of the game throughout these first 2. You know what you can get from Sati. You know what you get from Kalia. She needs to be the one to rally the troops for the supporting cast, because they need to match the energy. They need to be able to bring back the contributions they did have throughout the rest of the playoffs into the games, especially here at home. She needs to be the leader of that. And
Yep.
the other thing for the Phoenix Mercury, for myself, that I'm looking at is, you can look at this as being 2-0 down. You can also look at this saying, we were 30 seconds away from being 1-1 in the series, taking one in Las Vegas, if it weren't for the Satu Sabali silly technical foul at the end of game 1. If it
Yeah.
wasn't for Alyssa Thomas missing both free throws to try and
Yes.
take the lead at the end of game 1. So even though you're down 2-0, yes, game 2 was a little bit more rough, especially because you couldn't handle the Jackie Young, Asia Wilson duo. But you could say that we were close to making this 1-1. So we know we can compete with this high-powered offense. I think if you can find that energy back in game 1, continue to build off that offense, but also playing your style basketball, making it mucky and tough for the Las Vegas Aces in your home court, then I think they can try to claw back and get to the series. Again, it's one game at a time. You want to come out of here 2-2, but you got to start by winning game 3. And I think that's the momentum they have to go with going into here. One last thing before we move on to the Aces, Jay. The only other thing I want to say is, man, you got to get Asia Wilson off that elbow. You got to move Asia Wilson off that elbow, force her a little bit more
Ooh.
back, because once she gets to that elbow and you have that 1 in 4 out sort of scenario there with the Las Vegas Aces, she's gonna pick you apart. She's gonna have the space. That's where she gets freaking Alyssa Thomas into foul trouble, and then if you start triple teaming her, she's been finding people like Jewel Lloyd on the cuts and all that. Make her start a little bit further, and I think that can maybe help out a lot. Throw different looks at Asia Wilson, like I mentioned before, not just having Alyssa Thomas on her a lot of the time. They have the players to do so. They've shown that they're able to compete with that high powered offense. They just need to get these 2 games at home, and then this is a series again.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. This is one of those situations where, like, I mean, like I said before, I think honestly the best way to look at it, if you're Phoenix, is this is not about strategy. This is strictly about being able to bring the level of physicality necessary in this series to kind of make things difficult for the Aces. Because at this point right now, despite the fact that the scores look so close, these games have been a lot more out of hand and out of reach for the Phoenix Mercury than it looks like on the scoreboard, bro. It's like been not
Mm-hmm.
night and day from what the Phoenix Mercury have dealt with so far throughout this year, but like it's definitely been one of those where it's like, you know, this has not been their greatest outing of the postseason so far. These first 2 games, by any
Yeah,
means.
no, 100%. Hopefully, we get to see a Phoenix Mercury team bounce back. But again, it does start in Game 3. Hopefully, we get more of that. In terms of the Aces, I mean, they got to continue what they're doing. They got Asia Wilson, Jackie Young being by far the best 2 players in this series so far. They can continue that. They got the bench already involved. They look like they're in a good space. Let us know down below what you guys think. Who do you think is going to win the series? Hopefully, the Mercury do make it close and make this thing interesting again. But man, the Aces look damn good right now. And knowing their championship pedigree, knowing how they're able to respond in these sort of scenarios, it makes it hard to believe that this is not going to go the same way.
Nah, facts.
100%. Jay, let's move on to the next topic. The WNBA has been great. Hopefully, Wednesday's game, the Mercury are able to bounce back and keep this series going.
Yep.
But let's move on to the NBA 21 Qs. We are now in part 3. We're in the double digits in terms of questions now, Jay. And we have a good bunch of questions here. You talked to me before the episode saying there's more of these deep thinking questions because we got through a lot of the basic ones from the talk about the off season. You know, what team are you most excited for? This and that. Jay, let's think a bit more with these few questions. We have a good 5 questions here.
Yep.
Are you ready to get into it?
Yes, sir.
Let's go. And we'll start with the first question. Question number 11. Jay, and I'm gonna tell you right now. Shout out to Kenny Beecham because he did a whole episode based on this one question. I decided, you know what? Let's bring this question onto the 21 Qs. Who is the most intriguing NBA player to you going into the season? It could be for whatever reason, for good, for bad. Who is the most intriguing NBA player? You can really go a lot of ways with this.
DV, are you ready for this?
What?
Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Off camera, TV would have said, "Say it ain't so," because off camera, he thought there was no way. But yes,
Oh no.
he's coming back to the pod for
Oh
one more round.
no.
The answer is DeAndre Ayton, guys. Yes,
Oh,
it
is
is.
this for good or for bad? Again, you could really go different ways here.
Funny that you and it's funny. Okay, so off camera, just for a little bit of the pulling back the curtain here. Me and TV were having a little conversation about the topics that we were going to discuss today, just to kind of get a feel for where both of our heads were at. And we were talking about how a couple years ago, one of our big debates, we had Marcus on the podcast a few times and discussed this as well, was around Ben Simmons. There was a little bit of a mini Ben Simmons infatuation on the podcast for a while, thinking that maybe he could have a chance to kind of bounce back. Now he looks like he's facing retirement, but hey, whatever. And in the midst of those battles, another quote unquote favorite of the pod, you could say, for good or for bad, was DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah.
And he's a guy who I think in this season, it really can be either one. Now, so far during the preseason, I haven't been impressed, but there's been things to be intrigued about. He has 8 points through 2 preseason games. He also has 15 rebounds through 2 postseason games. He did not shoot the ball well at all in both games. He is 3 of 10 through 2 preseason games right now. But there's a couple of things to know. Austin Reeves, Luka Doncic, LeBron James. All have not been participants in preseason so far. So he's not had a high level passer to help him as a lob threat. We have seen situations where he has been a decent rim protector in space. I like the fact that he is rebounding the ball at a high clip because I think people need to remember that like this guy is a physical specimen that should be averaging the 10 rebounds he
Should
averaged last
be.
season.
He
Like
should be.
should be averaging the 10. This is how I look at it, TV. And this might sound silly, but this is how I genuinely feel about DeAndre Ayton as a guy that I feel like should be a very important player for this team. He had 2 blocks in both games of this preseason so far. He also had 2 or 3 really intriguing plays where they were like rim rolling finishes around the basket. Where sometimes I think he even missed the putback, even where he missed the original shot, and was able to get back up and get a putback for the finish. DeAndre Ayton's key word this season, as a guy that's going to be under one of the biggest microscopes in the NBA, as far as I'm concerned, as a
Especially now in
non-star
LA.
player, as a non-star player in Los Angeles during a season where this could potentially be LeBron James's last year, he's going to be one of the most under microscope players in the NBA. His calling card for this season is to be a top 15 rim defender in the NBA. Now, I know that sounds like a really low bar, middle of the pack. No. For this team that did not have a true rim defender last season, if DeAndre Ayton could be an above average rim defender this upcoming year, paired with the fact that they're getting Gabe Vincent back healthy, he had a very solid outing in that second preseason game against Golden State, and Vando is back and healthy, and he's a guy who can operate really well on the perimeter and looks very aggressive in preseason as well, as a guy who I saw guard Steph Curry for 94 feet in a preseason game. So he seems to be very active and excited about being back on the floor healthy
Hopefully he
for the
can stay
first time.
healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy.
Yeah, but there's a world where around Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and Austin Reeves, that if you have a defensive backbone that has Vando and DeAndre Ayton, and now you have guys like Gabe Vincent. You still have Marcus Smart as another defensive option as well. Hopefully he can return at least to not all NBA status, but still be one of, the top 20, 30 perimeter defenders in the NBA when he gets back on the floor. Now you have something to work with, but a lot of that infrastructure starts with the fact that DeAndre Ayton has to be an above average defender. Also, TV, he also has to be an above average center because he clearly is still their best starting center option. Like Jackson Hayes is just still not it, gang. Like it's still just that bad. So it's like DeAndre Ayton, it's gonna sound kind of like a backhanded compliment, but it's like DeAndre Ayton couldn't possibly be worse than Jackson Hayes, right? So if he's any better than Jackson Hayes, which so far through the preseason he's at least looked that way, that's a real upgrade for this team that just needed some kind of real consistent life at the center position that was more talented than Hayes. And I think they have that.
Yeah. He's definitely really intriguing. And the thing is, like when we talked about DeAndre Ayton a couple years ago, we said, this is a great start for him. He is in a market where no one's gonna think about him. Let's see if he can able to reach that potential that he wasn't able to in Phoenix, where he was asked to do a lot as a starting center for a finals team.
Yeah.
Now, Jay, he is now back on a team where he is expected to be a starting center on a potential championship team over there in LA. So will he rise up to the occasion like he has in the past? I'm not sure. And I think that's where a lot of the question mark goes to. But like you mentioned, they don't have much of a choice. They kind of have to deal with DeAndre Ayton. So that does what make him intriguing. The Laser fans were kind of just on him throughout most of the time there. Hopefully he sees this opportunity playing with a good team and really try to step up his game. You have one of the best point guards in the league in Luka Doncic feeding you balls. And we thought that Jackson Hayes was, going to become like a big part of this playoff run because of the way he started playing with Luka Doncic.
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton, you have the chance to do so now. Let's see if you're able to do it. Jay, my most intriguing player going into the season. And I'm more intrigued about this guy because we haven't seen someone with this high of a regard go into a situation like this where there's just a lot of pressure on the team in general.
Okay.
Jay, Cooper Flag for me is the most intriguing player going into the season because Jay, I was looking back at the bunch of the number one overall picks over the past probably this century.
Okay.
And I don't recall seeing a player who has to go into a situation where he's the number one overall pick and clearly the number one pick, by the way.
Yeah.
And he has to go in and be on a team which Nico Harrison has said there is a 2 to 3 year window here. So
Okay.
you have
You
you
think
have a
so?
bunch of older dudes on this team with Spencer Dinwiddie, you got Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, a lot of the top talent on this team, and a lot of players that they have heavy money invested in. I'm looking at also you, Klay Thompson. It's on like the back end of their careers, and
Yeah.
just waiting here in the wings is Cooper Flag, the number one overall pick, one of the youngest players in the league. How is he gonna what role does he have on this team? We know he's a
Yeah.
great defender, but now with the Kyrie Irving injury, is he gonna be the number one or two option straight off the bat? And not only does he have to figure that out at the early part of his NBA career, this Mavericks team has to make the playoffs this year, Jay.
True.
Nico Harrison has put that pressure on this team with an aging Anthony Davis, who, funnily enough, I wasn't going to mention this, but those pictures coming into camp, Jay. I mean, they traded away Luka because of the way that he looked going into training camp and stuff, and Anthony Davis going into training camp in that way. I find it very ironic. I just find it very ironic. But Cooper
Yeah.
Flag being in this mess of a situation, I know he's a good player. We know he's going to be. They're projecting him to be an elite defender. But what is he actually going to look like on a team that has expectations to go to the playoffs? Nico has put the expectation of them to go even further than the playoffs, especially on the timeline with the rest of the stars that they have.
Mm.
Where does Cooper Flag fall into this? Because I'm looking back at all these first overall picks. Paulo Banchero was given the keys to the car, and they're still trying to figure stuff out. He's had some playoff experience, but once they drafted him, they knew they're gonna have to give him some time and give him the keys to the car. Same thing with
Right.
Anthony Edwards. Same thing with a lot of these number one overall picks. Cooper Flag is in a completely different situation, in a situation that I have not seen before for a number one pick, and I'm just very intrigued to see how his season goes, and if somehow the narrative is going to switch on the Dallas Mavericks saying, "Oh, they have a number one overall pick on this team. Maybe the window is not as bad." Look, Nico traded away a generational player in Luka Doncic to make this happen. There's pressure on this team, no matter whether you want to twist it or not, and Cooper Flag has to play a big role in it immediately.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. At the end of the day, this team has expectations whether they like it or not, right? And I think
Yeah.
they're in a really interesting position because they're also playing quite the unique starting five, TV. Like, if you pull this up, the shooting is questionable
Yeah.
because according to
Yo, this is
ESPN,
forward city over here, Jay. This is forward city.
yeah, man, this projected starting lineup has D'Angelo Russell as the starting point guard, obviously, until Kyrie Irving comes back. Klay Thompson at the 2, Cooper Flag at the 3, Anthony Davis at the 4, Derek Lively at the 5. PJ Washington and Najee Marshall are coming off the bench. Dante Exum's always a question mark because of his health issues. Max Christie has been a solid contributor for them as well. I like
Daniel
Caleb Martin on
Gafford
the
coming
team
off the bench
too.
too. Yeah.
Daniel Gafford, when healthy, is also obviously very solid for this team. But TV, I named 10 guys. How many of them would you consider to be knockdown shooters / legitimate floor spacers?
I mean, the only one you can really say there is Clay as being that guy. You want to say that for PJ Washington, but it's also like not an elite level, so you can't really say that. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm saying too about Cooper Flag. Like, he's gonna have to do a lot of on-ball responsibility on this team. And is he
Yeah.
something he's gonna be something ready to do that? I don't know. That's why it's a lot of pressure for a guy coming into this team with high expectations going to the playoffs, but also has to play a big role in going to that. And doing this without Kyrie Irving, who was going to be their main ball handler, is gonna be an extra pressure put on Cooper Flag day one.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I have fear for is I just wonder how this team plans on going about operating offensively. In terms of
Yeah.
creating easy shots for themselves. This was already a middle of the pack offense last year. And this is a team that now is going to be missing Kyrie for a good portion of it. You're hoping for a bounce back year from Klay Thompson because the beginning of last year was not good by any means.
Yeah, it got better, but also, it wasn't great.
It
Yeah.
improved over the course of the year, but it was a very nasty start to the year where
Yeah.
people were starting to wonder whether or not that man fell off that cliff we were wondering about.
Yeah.
D'Angelo Russell is playing for in a bit of a prove-it year, coming off of a situation where it seems like a lot of people have kind of soured on him a bit, despite the fact that, there weren't a ton of D'Angelo Russell apologists to begin with, but this is a guy that's still capable of being a legitimate rotational point guard in this league. And some people were wondering, like, if, his best bet now is just to be like, the seventh, eighth man on a playoff caliber roster. I think he's still a talented enough player to be somewhere in that ilk, if not a little bit better. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks like as a starting point guard, particularly reuniting with Anthony Davis and seeing what that two-man game looks like. But TV, you touched on it, and I think it's just the most important is, do we get Point Cooper flag at some point throughout this series? Throughout this season? That's a question to really have to wonder about, because again, if you're not going to have the floor spacing offensively, the only thing other that you can lean on as a Dallas Mavericks is like, you arguably have some of the best positional size in the NBA. Like you really do. Do you lean into it though? Is the question. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's definitely gonna be really interesting. And again, it's a first overall pick that has to be thrown in this situation, trying to find his role here. He's gonna be asked to do a lot, but is he gonna be able to step up to the challenge? Where is he gonna end up being like used for the most part, especially in this early parts of the year? I'm not sure, but that's what makes Cooper Flag so intriguing. I'm excited to see what he's able to do going into the season.
Yeah.
Man, I hope you're right about DeAndre Ayton, though. I hope he's able to step up.
He was definitely a deep bag pool, but he was a guy that I felt like at the end of the day, the microscope on DeAndre Ayton is just going to be absolutely insane. And I feel like the biggest question for him too is like, I'm not going to lie, we've seen DeAndre Ayton in two very unique situations, right? With the Phoenix Suns playing in championship mode with Devin Booker and Chris Paul. You have an elite level point guard in Chris Paul as a two-man guy that you can lean on. You have Mikal Bridges. You have Cam Johnson as guys on the perimeter that can defend. Like, you have really strong infrastructure around yourself, right? Then you go to the Portland Trailblazers, where it's kind of like, hey, bro, just do your thing. Like, just do your thing, bro. Whatever that is, just be efficient and effective at it. And it just felt like he can never really find his footing. Like, the stats will say, oh, he averaged a double-double last year. He was one of the least effective rim protectors in the NBA last season. And even worse than that, this is a guy who barely got to the free throw line last season as one of the most physical specimens at the center position we have in the NBA right now. And it seemed like he could never generate real contact around the basket. Like, this is a guy that needs to be able to lean into his physicality in a way that helps him play to his potential. This is a guy that double-double, I'm not saying he should be averaging 20 and 10, but I'm saying he's coming off of a year with the Portland Trailblazers where it was like one of the most quiet, ineffective seasons we've seen. Like, quiet and inefficient seasons we've seen for a guy who averaged a double-double. The question is now where it's going to be loud, whether he performs well or he performs terribly, it's going to be loud regardless because of the team he plays on. Which one is he? Which pocket does he fit more into? Is he just cooked, or is this a guy that just needed a better situation? It doesn't get any better than this. You're
Yeah,
playing
we
against the
have to
Luka
wait and
Doncic,
see.
LeBron James, Austin Reeves. Like, it doesn't get any better than this. This might even with LeBron James and so deep into his career, this might even be a better infrastructure around you than even what you had in Phoenix. And that feels crazy to say, but it might be true.
We have to wait and see with DeAndre Ayton. I feel like we have the same questions for him every year. We got to see how he does, especially now under the bright lights of LA. Jay, next question. Who is your dark horse MVP candidate going into this year?
Okay, so I had to actually pull some stuff up for this one. This is one where I had to kind of look into a little bit. And the name that came to mind for me is Cade Cunningham.
I like it.
And first of all, he has to meet the criteria for dark horse, right? So for me, dark horse is, if I go to the sport books, you're a guy that's considered as plus 3,500 or more in terms of your likelihood to actually be the winner of the MVP award, right? According to CBS Sports right now, Cade Cunningham is at plus 5,500 in the MVP race preseason polls. I'm gonna read exactly what the CBS sportsbook says. Sportsbook says for because there's actually an article touching on the rankings, so to speak, of the potential MVP candidates, and Kate Cunningham was one of the leading names for that dark horse area. CBS Sports says he just turned 21. He was a third team All NBA pick last year, so right on the borderline of where we'd expect a winner to come from. He topped 25 points per game, will be among the regular season assist leaders, and is a part of a great defense. The Pistons started out 11-17, but then went 28-14 before Cunningham suffered a late season injury. That's almost a 55 win pace. If you assume that's roughly who the Pistons are with a full year in this system under their belts and more progression from the youngsters, we have our possible breakout Eastern Conference team. Cunningham is the undisputed alpha here, so he'd have a path to the candidacy. So let's go down the list of all the things they named. The Pistons could be a 55-win team potentially this year. With bringing back Malik Beasley, you get Jaden Ivey back. You get a contract year from Jalen Duren and Tobias Harris. This team potentially finishes top 4, top 5 in the Eastern Conference. That'll put you in the conversation. He averaged 25 plus points per game while being a guy who's going to lead the league or be one of the top leaders in assists this upcoming year. So you're going to be a guy that's going to have the counting stats to say you're going to be an all-star and in consideration for All-NBA again this season. You pair that with the fact that there's some real chance for this guy to have success in the Eastern Conference across the board because some of the other names we would normally talk about above him, Tyrese Halliburton and Jason Tatum more particularly, are not going to be in that conversation this year. So when we talk about, let's take Tyrese Halliburton particularly, when we talk about the best guards in the East, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, but TV, where do we go after that? Realistically, right? The
Yeah.
conversation can get very interesting. Once you take Tyrese Halliburton out of it, the conversation can get very interesting around who 3, 4, and 5 are in terms of the best guards in the NBA when you look at the Eastern Conference side. So if Cade Cunningham is good enough to be a top 3 guard in the East this upcoming season, that's going to put him in a real good contention to have his name discussed because he's going to be at the top of a lot of positional rankings and everything else. So Cade Cunningham, I think, fits the mold of Dark Horse between his actual preseason odds, the team he plays for, because I don't think the Pistons are going to get a ton of love this season either, despite the fact that they may be deserving of it. And the fact that I think if there was any year for him to kind of really take that leap, building off of last year feels like the right translation.
No, I like that pick too because again, we always talk about this when we talk about the East. There's wins to be had, and a team like the Pistons feels like a prime candidate to really take up a lot of those wins. And what really helps out Cade Cunningham is who's truly the second option on this team. There's no really true hierarchy. It's really Cade Cunningham, and the other guys have to figure themselves out at this point.
Yeah.
So he's gonna have the counting stats. The turnovers are gonna be tough because like turnovers were tough for him last year, especially. But the counting stats will be there. If the Pistons become like one of the top teams in the East, I could definitely see a path there. I just think that even though the numbers will be there, I just don't think, like you mentioned, the love for the Detroit Pistons is not going to be there for them to be like a real narrative surrounding Cade Cunningham. I do like the counting stats thing, and I do think like he'll have like if he has a chance to have like a 30+ point, 10 assist level season, there's a world that he could do that. I don't think the Pistons will be good enough to really be in that upper echelon because I think a big thing with him too, because we know that we're gonna have insane numbers from Shea, from Jokic, from Giannis, from all these guys. I don't think the Pistons are gonna be enough of a threat at the top of the East to give a real threat to catch him. But that's a good thing about the dark horse thing. That's what I like about that too. So
Yeah.
I definitely. The funny thing is, Jay, the guy who I have as my dark horse MVP candidate, I don't know if we're looking at the same odds, but he's right next to him. Give me Jalen Brunson as a
Okay.
dark horse.
You
As
think
a
you think
dark,
he's considered a dark horse? What makes him a dark horse?
I mean, firstly, when was the last time a freaking 6'1" point guard was going to end up winning an
That's a fair
NBA
point.
MVP
That's a
as
fair
a
point.
NBA MVP? Number two, the counting stats is going to be tough for him to kind of match up to the Giannis's of the world, the Jokic's, the Shea Alexander, and the fact that the Thunder might be like another 65+ win team going forward. But Jay, just like you said with Cade Cunningham, I think the Knicks more than anything. I think again it's going to be between them and the Cavs. are the number 1 and 2 best teams in the East,
Okay.
quite comfortably. And now adding in a new coach who is offensive centered in Mike Brown with an offensive centric point guard like Jalen Brunson. If the Knicks become a 60+ win team, he continues to be the leader of this team. I do want to see his assist numbers go up to maybe closer to like an 8 or 9 to help out his MVP case. But there's a world where Jalen Brunson can average 31, 32 points per game. Just 2 seasons ago, he was averaging 29.
Yeah.
And that. And then a more high powered offense of a Mike Brown. I think he's going to get more opportunities over there. I think that the Knicks are going to be a fantastic. There's a good chance that the Knicks are going to be a really good team out east. They're going to be, comfortably in the top 2 seeds. And although maybe the concern is Karl Anthony Towns is going to be like a usual 25 and 12 guy, maybe that takes away from Jalen Brunson. Oh, of course you got Mikal Bridges. Oh, you got OG Anunoby. Jalen Brunson is by far the focal point of that offense. And what is going to help out Jay, former Clutch Player of the Year, if you pair the market of New York plus the end of game highlights plus improved numbers, probably the best numbers of his career on a number 1 or 2 seed in the East, if they can, scratch near 60 wins, I think that is a narrative that people can buy into. And I think and then someone like Jalen Brunson, who is a focal point of probably, hopefully, one of the better offenses in the league with improved numbers. I think there's a path to it. Again, the count numbers are going to be tough. This is why these are dark horse candidates. I feel like there's going to be your typical 4 that you have every single year in Shea, Luka, Jokic, and Giannis.
Yeah.
It's hard for a lot of these guys on the outside to break into it. But there's a pathway for Jalen Brunson. He's going to have the media attention. And if the New York Knicks continue to will be as good as advertised, the NBA is going to push that. You
Yeah.
already know they're going to push that. And Jalen Brunson's going to be on the front of a lot of those headlines. So give me Jalen Brunson's mine.
I think that's a good pick when you think about the fact that he's also a guy that when you go the opposite end of the spectrum from someone like Cade Cunningham from a media perspective, they're going to push for it, right? There's
They
going to be a
will, yeah,
push for Jalen
exactly.
Brunson.
Yeah.
The question is going to come down to the mouths to feed. And I think that comes up in the CBS article a lot that some of the guys that you would like to consider, like even Paolo Banchero, I thought was an interesting fit for what I thought would be a guy that you could throw in the MVP conversation. But there's Franz, there's Desmond Bane now, Jalen Suggs back healthy, Anthony Black's looking to bounce back in a real way in his 3rd season in the NBA. Right? There's a lot of different mouths to feed on that team. You think about the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks, obviously, you think of Trae Young as the guy that can be that MVP candidate, but like he needs to be more focused on spreading the sugar around for this team and getting other guys offensively brought in a way where you're able to lean on Jalen Johnson again once he's healthy. You want to be able to lean on the fact that you have real shooters when Nikhil Alexander-Walker, Zachary Risache. You're in a good spot with that team offensively where you don't have to lean on Trae Young nearly as much to be this 27 to 30 point per game scorer, 10 assists per night. Like you don't want him to be that guy for the Atlanta Hawks. Otherwise, you're probably likely not winning games, which is not what the Hawks want this season if they're still doing that even with their current roster construction. So when you think about some of the guys that would come to mind who have a real chance, even Donovan Mitchell, for example, again, another mouths to feed situation, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen to a lesser degree, like the guys who come up mentally, you think like they're talented enough to be MVP candidates and potential MVP winners, but like how much of their impact supersedes some of the talent they play around to really put them into that conversation. Jalen Brunson, of some of the guys I named, like Donovan Mitchell and like Paolo Banchero, may have the most likely pathway
Mm-hmm.
to have his star still shine above the rest, so to speak.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, with the media push behind it as well, he has a good chance to really, make some noise just from that campaign alone.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be an interesting one. I love how we picked both East teams as well because there's a chance for a lot of these guys to take a jump there, especially with like some of the teams falling off a little bit. So I think if you're going to go for an Eastern for one of those dark horse MVP candidates, you're probably going to be better off going to the East. So yeah, that's a good one over there.
True.
Jay, let's move on to question number 13.
Okay.
Which rookie are you most excited for going into the season?
So I think my biggest thing is I didn't want to pick like the obvious one is Cooper Flag, right? Everybody wants to see what
Yes.
he decides to
Yes.
do this season. But the guy for me was VJ Edgecombe. And
I'm loving him in preseason right now, 100%.
yeah, he's in a really interesting spot right now because especially with the Jared McCain injury, he's going to be thrusted into probably being a guy that has to play real, like legitimate minutes. I think he was going to be a guy that got real play on the floor to
He
start the
could
season
start, Jay.
anyway.
He
He
could start.
Yeah, he looks smooth. I think the interesting thing with them is just seeing how they go about utilizing him because they got a really good thing out of Quentin Grimes last year, and you want to see what the continuation with that is because Quentin Grimes seemed to kind of really blossom in the time without Paul George and Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey on the floor last year. What does that look like once those three guys are back on the floor healthy? You pair that with the fact that at some point Jared McCain does have to come back. Tyrese Maxey obviously is going to be another real on-ball threat for them and a guy who you want to hopefully be like a tertiary at worst option offensively for this team. But VJ, I think, is a guy who can also play in win now situations. I think he's not. I don't believe he has the same level of pressure as Cooper does as far as his team's success, right? Because I think a lot of people are so low on Philadelphia this year that if Philadelphia simply just makes the playoffs, a lot of people would clap their hands, at least golf clap style, and just be happy that they were able to keep it together by the time the postseason came, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to Dallas, you're like, you just traded Luka freaking Doncic, claiming that you guys have a window where you're going to be OD solid. So I hope you're going to be OD solid, because if you're not, you just made one of the biggest mistakes of your life because that Los Angeles Lakers team finished top 3 in the Western Conference just last season with only half a year worth of Luka in their back pocket. So in their eyes, the Lakers can only go up because they barely had Gabe Vincent, they didn't have Vando, and they struggled at center. They addressed those issues while also getting a point of attack defender in Marcus Smart. What exactly did Dallas do this summer?
Yeah.
I mean, be real. Outside of Cooper, their team, outside of Cooper and D'Angelo Russell, their team is a carbon copy of what it was last year. Yeah. And I guess you get a full season of Anthony Davis, who apparently has to wear Kareem Abdul-Jabbar goggles for the rest of his career, or something that we heard in his NBA media day. Not that that means a whole lot, obviously, but still, it's something that at least has to be considered. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where VJ is in a situation where he doesn't have a ton of pressure from a team success perspective, but like this team,
the 76ers will put pressure on him, I feel.
Yes, I think this team feels pressure to make sure he is a win now caliber player. Exactly. If that makes any sense. Like the team success doesn't necessarily need to reflect whether or not VJ's good. It's just, can VJ play good basketball on a playoff caliber team is the real question here, right? Can he fit in a playoff caliber rotation is really the question. So it's less of whether or not this team finishes, top 5 in the Eastern Conference, and it's more so like, how does VJ fit next to Joel Embiid? How does he fit next to Paul George and Tyrese Maxey on the perimeter? Like, those are the questions you're asking. Versus with Cooper out the gate, it's like, hey, bro, y'all kind of got to win 50 games this year. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of spooky around here. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It really is that. And I hate that there's such a discrepancy for two totally different guys that were still both drafted in the top 3. But like the expectations are just so different. I think that allows VJ particularly to play with a little bit more freedom. But I think he also has a little bit more margin for error because he also plays on a very deep team considering his position. When you look at his position, Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, Quentin Grimes, like you go down the list and like there's a handful of guys that occupy his position as well. So he also has to be a producing player at a position where like he's gonna only get, he's on a pitch count, so to speak. Especially when Jared McCain comes back. He is on a bit of a pitch count. Kyle Lowry's still on this team as well. Like he's gonna have to make his minutes count. I think he's capable of doing that. It's just gonna be interesting to see what this team looks like, man.
I can't wait to see like what type of role he figures out to be here, because he's going to be a very much a connective piece for this team and a very important connective piece, because I feel like with the amount of offensive weapons that they have, even trying to figure out this guard rotation, like I find it hard to believe that there's a long-term solution with having Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey play together as a small backcourt. VJ Edgecombe is going to help keep this team together, and that's a lot of pressure for a rookie here, but he's going to have to play pretty well for this team to work out and play well in a real way. So definitely, I'm excited to see him play. I just hope that, he gets a fair shot over here.
Yeah.
Jay, the guy I'm most excited for going into the season, I'm becoming more and more of a fan of him just as a person, but man, just like his play style, I think on his team is going to be so important long term. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what Carter Bryant's going to be on the San Antonio Spurs
I
team.
like that name. I like that he was on the short list. I like that name.
Jay, do you see? By the way, do you see how many people are going to be injured to start the year for the San Antonio Spurs? No De'Aaron Fox, no Dylan Harper for probably a couple months. I feel, and the thing is, like with the San Antonio Spurs, and what's interesting about their wings, Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell have been expendable for the last couple of years, so they're still trying to figure out what these wing positions look like.
Yeah.
In terms of the guards, they have an abundance of guards. They have an embarrassment of riches for young guards now paired with De'Aaron Fox is on an extension. Jay, with Devin Vassell potentially on the move, maybe not this during the season, but coming soon. Same thing with Keldon Johnson. I feel like Carter Bryant, the idea of Carter Bryant is exactly what the Spurs need. Someone who's going to play defense end to end,
Yeah.
someone with a developing 3-point shot, and with the amount of mouths they have to feed on the perimeter, and including Victor Wembanyama,
Yeah.
he's going to fit in right there, potentially being a catch and shoot 3-point shooter. I want him to be kind of like the OG Anunoby for this San Antonio Spurs team eventually. And now with the opportunities opening up, with the amount of injuries that they have, we might see Carter Bryant more than we thought maybe going into the draft. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what he has going on. I think that he's going to be an elite defender. We saw that in Summer League, that we saw just like those glances, those, kind of spots where he could just pick up a guy 94 feet. He has the length, he has the size. I just want to see how this fits in with the San Antonio Spurs team, and I'm excited to see how he could do. Because if you could think of a long-term future with Carter Bryant, if he could be an all defensive level perimeter defender with Victor Wembanyama on the inside, Jay, this could be a scary defense for years to come.
Nah, seriously. I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing too is you have to think about what they need from him, particularly from a defensive perspective. Like, he's a guy that I think their calling card this season, especially with the injuries that they have, particularly at the positions they have the injuries at, is this team is gonna have to hang their hat on being a top 10 defense to kick off the year. Like, with
Yeah,
Victor Wembanyama coming back in season 3 and kind of really needing to prove himself this year after the blood clot thing. Don't get me wrong, you can only judge that by
not his
so much.
fault.
That's
Not his
completely
fault.
out of
Yeah,
your control.
yeah.
But TV, I don't know if you saw it because the streets was talking. We didn't discuss it on the podcast. Victor Wembanyama was ranked the 5th best player by ESPN on the
I
ESPN
don't
Top
take those
100.
seriously.
I'm not saying I take it seriously, but I think the expectations for
Yes,
Victor
yeah.
Wembanyama in season 3 go to show you that this San Antonio Spurs team needs to at least make some rumblings this
Be a
season
playing team. At the very least, be a
at the
playing team.
very least. And I think they also need to be a team that I think has to build a bit of a defensive identity. Like, they need to get to a point where, like, yo, you have one of the best rim protectors in the NBA easily. You have a guy who probably would have ran away with DPOY had he not went down with injury early enough in the season where he wasn't able to be eligible by games played. They have the defensive infrastructure from a talent perspective. If you look at Sohan, you look at Carter Bryant, obviously Victor, they have the guy, they have a handful of interesting prospects to fit the mold. The question is, like, how much will they lean into that though? And I think at the beginning of the season, I think they have to in order for them to even be a decent basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, without Dylan Harper, without De'Aaron Fox to start off the year, I mean, we kept complaining over the last few years. Where's the guard play for Victor Wembanyama? They finally get it, and now it's injured to start the year, which
Yeah, I
is
know.
tough. So it's a lot of onus on Stephon Castle, who did win Rookie of the Year, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of onus on him to start off the season. But yeah, no, I'm just super excited for Carter Bryant. I feel like you don't want to go down early career Rudy Gobert standards where you're okay with whatever you have on the perimeter and you just trust Victor Wembanyama on a year to year basis. You want to make sure that you want to have 2020's Rudy Gobert on the Timberwolves where he can still affect the game in such a huge way defensively, but you still have the Jaden McDaniels, you still have the Nickeil Alexander Walkers from like a couple seasons back. You want to have that type of system rather than the former, like the Utah Jazz. You don't want to be in that situation if you're the San Antonio Spurs. And I think Carter Bryant is the start of that. I want him to get the opportunity. I'm excited at the prospect of him. And and I hope he gets some real minutes early because I feel like as one of those like long-term pieces, yes, you should have to figure out the guard position. Carter Bryant needs to be a long-term piece at that wing position. He is absolutely needed if you want to get the best out of Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs team.
I think Carter Bryant's going to be an interesting prospect for this team, and I think they want to see. He's such a raw prospect too, and that was a big conversation around him in the draft
Offensively, yes,
process.
he's a raw.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a raw
he's
offensive
very
prospect.
raw, but the skill set defensively, this is a little bit of a high praise thing, but I believe that like if Carter Bryant can be to the Spurs what Tumani Kamara was for Portland last year,
I mean,
that's
that's
a
all
that's a
defense right there. That's
that's
all
a
defense.
dude. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Yeah, that's a dude, bro. Like, so I
Hopefully,
mean,
I
that'll
hope.
be an interesting thing to see because the defensive chops are there. Even let's use a quote unquote a lesser name, but still the prospect fits. Think about what Matisse Thybulle was, ironically also on Portland right now, but what Matisse Thybulle was for those early
76.
76ers teams defensively as well, right? Where like he was the Andre Roberson build type for that team
Yeah.
where like you don't ask him to do too much offensively, but defensively this guy can strap up against some of the best on the perimeter. If he could even just be that for this team, it goes a really long way because we know the offense is going to take time to build. But if defensively he can come out the gate and come out swinging, that's a lot to build on given the fact that this team already has a good handful of athletes that can defend in space and really guard at a high level. Like they have the talent per se.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think what gives me a bit more hope too is that compared to an Andre Roberson and a Matisse Thybulle early on in their careers, I feel like Carter Bryant's already better at them at the beginning parts of their career. So there's only
Yes.
room. There's just more room to go for that. Hopefully, he can continue to do that. I want to see him get real minutes here with the Spurs, and you're doing something right if he ends up starting at the end of the year. So hopefully that becomes like the path that he goes throughout this season. Jay, final two questions of the episode. Number 14. Which team are you just not buying the hype of? There's a few teams that people are excited for. Sometimes like overly excited at certain aspects. Or is one of those teams where you're like, man, I just can't see it. Or
So
just even a lesser extent. I don't know. We'll see where you go with this. But yeah, go ahead.
so the easy answer, just based off of sports books, like stuff like championship odds, is like I don't think that the Lakers are like a real championship favorite the way like the sports books have them. Like TV, I went on ESPN bets NBA futures. They have the Lakers as having the sixth best odds to win the championship this upcoming season. And that projects them to be the fourth best Western Conference team behind the Denver Nuggets and the Houston Rockets. And I'm not saying they're not on par with those other three teams. I just also don't know if this is a championship roster because you got Vando back and you got DeAndre Ayton and you bring in Marcus Smart. Like, I do believe that there are positional upgrades, especially getting Gabe Vincent back healthy as well. I do think there are positional upgrades compared to last year. And yes, this team was third in the Western Conference when the season ended. But I don't know. But the team that I actually think is getting a little bit more gas than I could have possibly wondered, that's still just like not making any sense to me, is like, why do people think the Boston Celtics are still going to be decent? I'm very confused on this one. I keep looking
Excuse
at
me?
stuff. And all of these things keep putting the Boston Celtics as a team that's going to finish like top 6 in the Eastern Conference still this year. TV, I'll use ESPN Bet's future as an example. Okay, they have, if we're using title odds, in order of Eastern Conference teams, it's Cleveland number 1, New York number 2, the Orlando Magic number 3, the Atlanta Hawks number 4, and the 5th best odds to win the title out of the Eastern Conference next season is the Boston Celtics at plus 3,300. Is the East that down bad that even after moving off of Drew
Indeed.
Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and the Jason Tatum news, and I know Jason Tatum is going on a full-blown media spree telling everybody that he might be back by, the start of 2026, which I mean, shout out to JT if he's Superman enough to be able to come back that soon. But like, maybe they're leaning into that. But the fifth best team in the Eastern Conference, when arguably your third best player behind Jaylen Brown and Derek White next season is probably Anthony Simons, who I'm not disrespecting, but it's still a really young guy who we haven't seen play meaningful basketball in quite some time now. And he may arguably be your third best player next season. TV, who's their starting center? We've made this joke on the podcast a few times. Who's their starting center? Neemias Queta?
It's gonna be Kita. It's gonna be Kita.
And that's the fifth best team in the East? That's tough. That's tough to me. So I think that as much as I want to hate on the Lakers, I can see the projection for them at least a little bit. The Boston Celtics being the fifth best team in the Eastern Conference by some of these projections, that is nuts. That is nuts to me.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. The fact that the fact that they are the same as the Dallas Mavericks and 76ers, who I think have a lot better supporting casts combined,
Yes.
it's definitely a tough sell to me.
Yeah, like I think maybe the media is just heavily leaning into this recent news around Jason Tatum potentially being able to make a comeback during the 25-26 season, and maybe that's what's fueling this. But I'm not buying that either. I think if you're the Celtics, you take this year for exactly what it is. As financially cap-strapped as they were last season, go into this year, get Jason Tatum healthy. You have the position to get yourself a lottery pick if your team is bad enough in this conference. You get a lottery pick added to this team who's cost controlled long term, and with all the moves they made on the margins with Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, particularly also letting Al Horford walk, they've got a lot of financial flexibility in 2026, 2027 to re-up their roster again. So why throw him back into the fray so early when we know the timetable says this guy should miss the entirety of the season? So I think all the hype and hoopla around this team potentially still being in the mix in 2025-26, I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Yeah, no, the fact it's just like just don't. I mean, I don't see it either. If anyone's actually trying to make that argument, I'm very surprised with that. I mean, we talked about it in the over unders. One injury and this team is done for.
Yeah.
They already are so fragile to begin with, and the fact that you trust them to be close enough to like the Golden State Warriors and all that is very surprising to me. Yeah, I don't think they're going to be they're not a top 6 team. They might be a playing team, but they're definitely not going to be a top 6 team in the East. They have to have that Jason Tatum thing in the back of their mind. That's the only reason I'm thinking that. But yeah, I don't agree with that either, 100%. Jay, I might have to be bold here because I know the East is depleted, but I don't think Desmond Bain is the true answer for this Orlando Magic team.
No, TV, no, believe.
Oh
Believe,
man,
TV.
I want to, man. I just seen these last 2 years in the playoffs and just how rough this team has looked on the offensive end. To
Yeah.
think that one man is gonna save that in Desmond Bain. I know we've been saying all they need is an offensive guard. All we need is an offensive guard. I'm looking at their roster as a whole, and I'm like, are you sure that's all they need? Like, yes, they added like Tyus Jones as the backup point guard, which I'm very comfortable with. We love Tyus Jones here in the pod. Let's be honest. But
Yeah, of course.
Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter, Paulo Banchero, that's a lot of people occupying the same space. It's a lot of people and it's a lot of mouths to feed,
You're not
and
wrong.
not a lot of consistency on that perimeter. Now, can they
Yeah.
prove me wrong and actually improve the 3-point shot? Maybe the more attention to Desmond Bain can really open up the floor for the rest of them. In an ideal world, yes. But to say that this team is ahead of the Clippers and the Timberwolves without really even having that deep of a playoff run, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I like this Orlando Magic team. I like Paolo Banchero. I'm a big fan of Franz Wagner. It's just you have talent, and talent is good. But if you're occupying the same spaces and trying to still figure that out year 3, year 4,
Yeah.
and thinking that Desmond Bain is going to be the be-all, end-all savior to all this, I just don't think that's wise to think that that's going to be enough for them to really become a viable offense. I still think this
Yeah.
offense is going to have a lot of problems, especially going deep into the playoffs.
Mm.
So the defense is going to be there. I think the system that Jamal Mosley has set up is gonna translate no matter what, especially with the
Yeah.
guys. It translated with literally whoever was on the court. That's how good the Orlando Magic defense is. But even with the talent they have now, and now with the addition of Desmond Bain, I'm still iffy on that offense. The 3-point shooting still probably not going to be there. If Paul Banchero becomes a league average, slightly above average 3-point shooter, maybe I'll eat crow. If Ron Wagner can become a near 37-38% 3-point shooter, maybe that'll be better than the low 20s, the low 30s, high 20s that he was last year. Maybe it'll be better. I'm just not convinced with this team yet. And the thing that they have maybe the third best odds, I don't know. I feel like the Detroit Pistons have, I feel like, closer to reliability in terms of playoff basketball. Closer to the fact that the Orlando Magic's at 1,500 and the Pistons at 4,000. I feel that's too big of a gap for me.
Mm.
Too much big of a gap there. So I'm just gonna say the Orlando Magic. I just not fully trusting this offense yet. Maybe this year to prove me wrong, but I'm not buying fully into the hype, even though I love the Desmond Bain edition.
I can't really be mad at you because I think a lot of the media is a little taken aback by really how to feel about the Orlando Magic, particularly when it comes to the idea of like you said, can Desmond Bain create so much gravity for this team that now all of a sudden
The
they're
offense
this
is not
high
preventable.
flying
Yeah.
offense? Yeah, and you have to kind of ask yourself, where is the spacing going to come from? And I think there's a certain element to that. Obviously, you bring in Jace Richardson out of Michigan State in the draft. He's one of the top 3-point shooters in coming in into this draft class. Desmond Bain, 38% 3-point shooter. Jalen Suggs, when healthy, 38% 3-point shooter.
But are they going
Tyus
to even play
Jones.
Jace Richardson that much this year to even make a real difference?
I
That's the
think there's
thing
a real
too.
question mark around that because TV, if you look at that backup shooting guard position, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily solidified. And I
Yeah.
think that
Okay.
Jace
Okay.
Richardson fits a lot of the mold of what they drafted Jet Howard to be a few seasons
Oh
back.
yeah.
But I think
I
that
forgot he's
Jace
still on the
Richardson,
team.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
Jace Richardson has much more upside as a guy who can also operate on ball. I wouldn't be surprised if Jace Richardson does get real minutes. I wouldn't be surprised that given the fact that Anthony Black is 6'9", that they have a lineup where on the second unit, Tyus Jones at the 1, Jace Richardson at the 2, Anthony Black at the 3, Tristan da Silva at the 4, and then some machination of either Jonathan Isaac or Goga Batadze at the 5. And they have this very interesting switchable lineup. Obviously, their backcourt is going to get picked on defensively like a mug, but now you have between Tyus, Tristan, Jace, and to a lesser degree also someone like Goga Batadze. Goga, Tristan, Jace,
Yeah.
Tyus, and arguably Anthony Black if he can get the 3-ball rolling. But let's name those 4 guys and maybe leave Anthony Black out until he proves it. You have 4 guys who can space the floor in that second unit, and that's pretty solid. But again, the Magic are a good litmus test of we gotta see it first. They're a good example of that. We need to see it in practice first. Now,
Yes.
I'm interested as to why your belief in the Pistons as a playoff team is a little bit more faithful. That's kind of
Not
interesting to
not
me.
not faithful, but
Okay.
I just feel like the odds are just too far for those two teams. I feel like maybe the Pistons should, maybe it means that the Magic should be a little bit lower in odds
Okay.
more than anything. But I feel like the fact that there's a plus 2,000 difference between both these teams
True.
just doesn't seem right to me.
Okay.
I don't know what it is. It just feels too big in terms between those two Eastern Conference teams.
That feels fair. I think at the end of the day, that the Orlando Magic are getting a lot of hype because of the fact that the question around the Eastern Conference the first question anybody asks when you say, what are your thoughts on the Eastern Conference in the NBA this season, besides saying it's down, is I don't know who the third best team in the East is. I think
Yes.
that's always the question that first comes to mind is who even is the third best team in the Eastern Conference, legitimately. And the Magic on paper feel like that team behind the Knicks, behind the Cleveland Cavaliers. Is yo, they should be a team to worry about. On the flip side, again, This team has been a bottom 5 offense the last 4 years.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
one man getting them up to a middle of the pack would be a successful season. Them jumping up into being a top 10 offense with this group is God's work itself. Like just looking at what their track record is.
yeah. I just don't know like how much of a big like how big of an impact that Desmond Bain sign is going to be, and if that's really gonna. I mean, it's going to move the needle for sure. But how much of a needle mover is that move? It's going to be interesting to see. Again, like you mentioned, wait and see what the Orlando Magic. I excited to see what they have this year, but I still have my doubts. I have my doubts. Jay, final question of the episode: what player? This is one of my favorite preseason questions that we do every single year, and I'm glad we're ending it here.
Okay.
What player? What player's stock is really low right now that you're willing to invest in? This is where we talked about the Ben Simmons of the past. We were
Yep.
able to do this. DeAndre Ayton. Who are you in this year?
All aboard the unction. Choo choo. I am driving the train for Bradley Beal. Come on, man.
Ah, I like that.
Bradley
I
Beal
like
to
that.
me Bradley Beal to me this season is going to prove a lot of people wrong, man. A lot of people got low on Bradley Beal over these last 2 seasons because they look at the production, 15 points per game. Sure, he shoots above 55% from the field. He was having a very solid shooting splits from 3 last season in particular, but the on-ball usage wasn't the same as it's been in years past, blah, blah, blah. And they say, man, he's cooked. And he really only looked cooked because the thing that's got him boiling over fire is the fact that he was owed all that bread for the last 2 to
Exactly.
3 years.
Exactly.
Now that he's on a much more lucrative deal, a much more team-friendly deal, which it seems like the LA Clippers could use a lot of right now with the type of stuff that's going on with them. Now that he's on a more cost control deal, it makes it where you view him as this player that's like, okay, now what does he do on the floor? We're not worried about what his money to production is no longer the question mark.
Yes.
He's not a 40, $50 million a year player that we need dropping 25 points a night. Otherwise, what the hell am I paying you all this money for? Now you're getting paid, I believe it's like 15 million, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Whatever that like big time mid level exception is. Yeah.
Yeah, so around 14, $15 million,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, to be a 18 point per game scorer, 19 point per game scorer. How much did Norman Powell average last season?
That was like 23 or something like that. It's crazy idea what you were getting
So,
from Norman Powell.
so Norman averaged 21, nearly 22 points
21,
per
so
game last year on
22,
48% shooting from the field. And let's pull up the full stats because this will be a good kind of comparison.
yeah.
He shot 41.8% from 3 last season, averaged nearly 22 points per game, and he was shooting 48% from the field. For context, last season for Bradley Beal, and let's use that kind of again as a way to kind of compare the two now.
I mean, he is
Bradley
taking Norman
Beal,
Powell's role, so this is probably a
yeah,
different.
yeah, exactly. And last year, Bradley Beal averaged 17. He shot 49% from the field last year. He shot 38% from 3 on a little less 3-point attempts than Norman did. Could Bradley Beal in the Norman Powell role, without all the hoopla of the does he fit around Kevin Durant and Devin Booker multi-ball handlers thing, that's not as big of an issue on this LA Clippers team because James Harden is a much better facilitator than either one of those two guys with the Suns last year. You have
And Chris
Chris Paul,
Paul.
who's another guy who can be a big-time facilitator. And the likelihood that Kawhi Leonard plays more than 55, 60 games this year is pretty low. So there's going to be certain games where you have to be the second or third best offensive option on any given night, right? I think Bradley Beal's obviously the third best offensive option out the gate, but there's nights where he may have to be the second best option,
Yeah.
right? So can Bradley Beal average 22, 23 points per game on this LA Clippers team, getting paid $15 million a year to shoot 48, 49% from the field and near 40% from beyond the arc? That's a player that deserves a lot more respect than the way we've been talking about Bradley Beal for like the last 2 or 3 years, bro. So I
Yeah.
think he's a guy that I think is going to right the ship for a lot of people. And when people aren't pocket watching, and they just look at the production on the floor, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, that guy Bradley Beal is still a good basketball player. As opposed to some of the stuff that we've heard over the last 2 years where it sounded like a lot of people were calling for that man head.
Yeah, no, he was a victim of, oh yeah, you have $55 million next to your name. And you're gonna be subject to a lot more criticism when
Yes.
if you're not performing to be like all NBA, all-star level type of player. So a lot less pressure, a lot more, mouths to feed, a lot more different options you can get there with the Clippers. I do like that one. I like yours too because I think like there's not going to be much for Bradley Beal at all because of the contract being so low too. So I like that. The thing about my guy and who I'm investing in, it might be low regardless, but especially with the contract that he has. But man,
Okay.
to say that this man's washed, I will not believe it until I fully see it. Bro, let me get a little piece of wood drifting away into Paul George Island. Let me get into Paul George Island.
Interesting. Okay.
Kind
Let
of
me hear the
similar to
bit.
Bradley Beal in a sense
Okay.
where they're coming off a lot of year due to a lot of scrutiny,
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of injuries. Bradley Beal, not a great playoff run last year too. They didn't make the playoffs at the end of last year too, which doubles down on that. Paul George barely got to play, and they're pissed at him because he was in the Bradley Beal situation a couple years ago, but now he is here with the Philadelphia 76ers, who is on the second year of his 4-year deal max contract. So it looks pretty bad. I understand it looks pretty
Yeah.
bad. But I won't believe this man's washed. I think that this guy is still going to provide a big role for this Philadelphia 76er team. Now, is it going to be enough to justify the amount of money he's going to be paid for? I feel that's a different question. That'll be a different sort of conversation. But to say that Paul George still can be an 18 to 20 point per game scorer on this team, someone who could still give you pretty solid defense from the 3 or 4 position. I think last year was just the 76ers just being such a complete mess that no matter what they touched, no matter who was in contact with them, they were going to be cursed at some point.
That's hilarious. Hey yo,
It
yeah,
was bad.
it was just that bad,
It was
yeah.
that. It was them and the Pelicans. No matter who they touched, it turned out to be just the worst season for everyone. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a decent bounce back year for him. Again, people are still going to be complaining about the contract. There's going to be the way we talk about Paul George's next 2 years is the same way we talked about Bradley Beal the last 2 years. Probably even worse, especially with the age taking into factor. But I still think Paul George still has something left in the tank. I think that people who are taking a DeMar DeRozan season this year over him, I feel like saying that they're going to take DeMar DeRozan easily over him is going to. I feel like that's a bit overboard. I think it's more of a conversation that people would like to admit. But I
Okay.
think Paul George is going to have a bounce back year. I think that he's still going to be a good contributor to a playoff 76er team, which I'm expecting them to bounce back in that sense where they're going to be able to make the playoffs. And with him next to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, it looks ideal on paper. Maybe you might not get that for X amount of games, but I think Paul George, after what seemed like to be a disaster class sort of season, is going to bounce back in a pretty good way and still give you solid defense, give you that 20 points per game, and make it so that Paul George gets back into at least respectable conversations and not just be considered like I think like ESPN had him like as like a top 77 player, which is kind of insane to me. I still think Paul George still has a lot left in the tank.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with Paul George, again, is kind of that falling victim of what his price tag is. But I think it's also given the fact that you look at the elaborate plan that Daryl Morey put together to go after Paul George. And you look at it and you just wonder whether or not the saga with James Harden and all of the stuff in terms of trying to clear up legitimate cap space, whether or not the juice was worth the squeeze, essentially, is the question you're asking
Yes,
yourself.
yes.
And so far, Paul George has not proven that. Granted, health was a big factor as to why that was the case, but this is a guy who, I mean, I ain't gonna lie, and he even joked about it on his podcast at one point, like, he's got to prove that he's just not the new placeholder for what Tobias Harris was for this Philadelphia 76ers team once upon a time. That's
Exactly.
really all that Paul George has slowly but surely, really quickly became in
Quickly,
Philly
yes.
is this punching bag for Philadelphia 76ers fans to say, here comes another wing that's paid more money than he's worth to just be an ISO scorer that's not efficient. Here we go. Here we go again. And I mean, Jimmy Butler, Jimmy Butler said Tobias Harris over me. Now it's Paul George over James Harden.
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler, has went on to do some very solid things since playing with the Philadelphia 76ers, including going to two
More
NBA
than that.
Finals,
More than that,
right?
yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, James Harden still has been an All-NBA, All-Star caliber player post-Philly. Like, you got to start questioning decisions from Daryl Morey when you start to see the other side of the rainbow for these teams of like, okay, you made these quote-unquote big swings and played hardball with some of your better players in the past. And so far, like, this stuff is not played out nearly as well as you would have hoped. And, you know, Daryl Morey has not had a great return on investment in Philly
Especially
so
in Philly,
far.
yes. Yes.
And Paul George could either be his crowning jewel achievement, or it could be really one of the worst moves he's ever made throughout the entirety of his career, even dating back to all the great work he did with Houston. Like, it could be a big beast, like a big blotch on his record of great moves he's made throughout his general managing career, because you were in an era with Philly that, like, you never were able to right the ship for this team. Like, we knew this team was cursed for a while. We made jokes about it for years about the injury
Near a
situation and
decade.
the
Yeah, near a decade.
Colangelo era and all kinds of stuff related to that. But
Yeah.
Daryl Morey was supposed to be the guy that came out and whipped the magic wand out and, like, you know, fairy dusted some of these problems away because he's just supposed to be a quote unquote better decision maker. Instead, I ain't gonna lie, TV, these decisions have been looking real questionable. And, you know, Paul George has a lot to do with that. And Paul George is in a proven year of his own because, like you said, a lot of people are starting to low-key call Bro washed. And I ain't saying he is, but he's not helping his case.
He's definitely not helping his case. That's why I think, like, in terms of value for a lot of these guys, he is basically near the bottom of the barrel with the start to he's had to his Philadelphia career. It's so it can only go from here. Hopefully, I mean, it's hard to go lower than what you did last season. I just wanted to be some gradual growth, and maybe people starting to come back on the Paul George train, and that's what the investment I'm willing to make for this season. Hopefully, Paul George could still be a borderline all-star level player for Philly fans' sake, and hopefully, I don't know if he'll make that contract worth it, but at the same time, at least like be there for Philly and also just be available and good enough to be like a number 2 or number 3 option still on that team. I'm really hoping that for Paul George. But
Yeah.
yeah, Jay, that's been 5. That's been the 21 questions part 2. We have one more part to go through in the next episode. 6 more questions to go for the NBA 21 question series. Let us know down below your answers to these questions and all that. So your thoughts on the WNBA, the WNBA playoffs that we talked about earlier in this episode. We want to hear your thoughts on that as well. This has been a great episode, Jay. Thank you guys for watching. What do you have to tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
Yeah, man. NBA preseason in full effect. Shout out to the page because we're going to be probably covering a lot of really interesting stuff on the TikTok soon. Routine Jumper is finally starting to get booted up, so you guys can check me out on Twitter at Routine Jumper _ there. Finally decided to start posting stuff, so things should be going up there very soon on Twitter. I told myself I would never touch Twitter, but it seems like a pretty good place to post certain things if you got quick thoughts to go. So that's somewhere where I might be posting a lot during some of these preseason games. I will be low-key locked into. There's a few games that you guys will have already seen, but I'm going to say there's a couple of teams in particular for this preseason that I'm watching very closely. One of them is TV's Toronto Raptors. Very interesting to see what they do in preseason because I want to see what Brandon Ingram does. RJ Barrett was ranked as the 100th best player according to ESPN after being in the top 60. I think he's a lot better than that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So I want to see him particularly in this time frame. I'm watching the Thunder. I love what Nikola Topic is doing. What he's been able to do so far in preseason. I think he's going to be a really solid player for him. It seems like the Thunder just cannot miss. And a name that a lot of people are not going to bring up because the Nets are just not a squad that most people are going to watch this season. But very intrigued to see Ben Seraph. I liked what I saw in those opening games the opening game for them against Melbourne, or I think it was against it was across the pond.
Yeah.
But when they played that first preseason game, I like his decision making. I think he plays with a really good head on his shoulders in terms of making good reads with the ball. And I think he's a guy that I think I want to keep an eye on this entire season, actually, beyond just preseason. So there's a couple of names that I'm kind of paying attention to. I'm actually a lot more tapped into preseason than I thought I would be. maybe I just miss basketball that much. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below. Let us know in the comment section down below, like what are some of your biggest storylines, most interesting players to watch
Yeah.
coming out of preseason, because I'm interested to read those comments and kind of tap into some of these players and kind
Yeah.
of find some guys I want to cling to for the year.
100%. I mean, if someone can stick out from that Nets guard group that they ended up drafting, basically like an entire starting five of them, it'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And they're hoping that stands out as well. So, yeah, definitely gonna be tapping into the preseason. Definitely gonna be tapping into the WNBA Finals. Great time to be a basketball fan, and of course, the NBA season is right around the corner. So be on the lookout for that. And for the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, make sure you find us on all of the social media pages, YouTube, podcast networks, all of that. We appreciate all of y'all's support. We will be back again next week for another new episode. I know I didn't post the the NBA all-time draft. I was hella busy this weekend. I wasn't expected to be this busy, but it will be out very soon. But yeah, there's gonna be a lot of good episodes going out. Basketball is just gonna continue to ramp up, so be on the lookout for the Hit Your Features podcast everywhere where you can find us. But yeah, it's been a fantastic episode. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you all have a fantastic day. This is TV. This is Jay. We're signing out. Peace.